Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 17th day of October 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. Up first, there are no warnings, watches, or advisories out on hazardous weather graphics here. No illuminated areas anywhere around the state for tonight into tomorrow, possibly even through the next day. Moving on to satellite imagery, you do have a pretty good system there bringing some decent amounts of rain and wind to eastern Bering Sea, southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, as well as Kodiak Island, with rainfall amounts up along the North Gulf Coast, about 2/3 of an inch falling by mid-afternoon at Seward, and 3/10 of an inch over at Cordova, but not making too much inland headway. Valdez only picking up about 6/10 of an inch of precipitation. And southern Cook Inlet, actually Pedro Bay picked up about 3/4 of an inch of rain in the east-southeasterly flow there, and really not much making it into the Cook Inlet area. Portage carrying some rain, about 4/10 of an inch fell at Mount Alyeska, again a 12-hour amount. Otherwise, kind of a break there over the Bering Sea. Winds are pretty gusty though out of the north, with Gamble seeing on St. Lawrence Island seeing north winds gusting to 44 miles an hour, while St. Paul Island had gusts to 55 miles per hour. Down at Nikolsky there in Unmak Island on the west end there, they had a peak wind gust of 57 miles an hour. And St. George Island had 67 mile an hour wind gusts, so quite an area, quite a fetch of northerly winds are coming down around the backside of that low pressure area. About 2/3 of an inch of rainfall fell at Kodiak Island with winds of 50 to 55 miles an hour and gusts from Kodiak State Airport up into the Barren Islands and eastward to Middleton Island, seeing gusts 55 miles per hour. Clouds starting to increase there on the north coast of the Panhandle, but pretty nice day. It was increasing cloud kind of day for the northern Panhandle, but some sunshine lingering into the mid to late afternoon down to the south, as you can see. Mostly clear skies down that way into Dixon Entrance. A lot of lower clouds over the Bering Sea, and a lot of lower top clouds, lower to mid-level clouds over the North Slope Arctic coast. Areas of light snow produced anywhere from maybe up to an inch in some areas along the Arctic coast. That was the exception more than the rule. Amounts were much lighter than that, usually less than a half inch or just trace amounts. And that'll continue into tonight, probably into tomorrow as well. Next system entering the western Bering Sea there, just starting to bring some moisture into the far western Aleutians, start to pick the winds up a little bit there as that moves on in. And on the chart, you can see that moisture not quite to shimmy out to yet, but very close, actually just to the north and northwest there. Currently, out ahead of that, ridging with lighter winds and drier conditions. Clearing not quite as extensive what I got shown out there, but a little bit of clearing, definitely dry conditions with light winds, then pick up the shower activities, head toward the eastern Aleutians along with the wind. Winds coming down though, St. Lawrence Island and areas of light snow, central eastern Arctic coast, maybe into the North Slope, flurries on the west side there, down actually reaching the Shishmaref and Tent City area, carrying some light snow at times this afternoon. Interior dry and variably cloudy with the wind and rain, heavy wind and rain, heavier wind and rain, or the moderate rain and heavy wind, Kodiak Island up into the North Gulf Coast, where there were some storm warnings out today for the offshore area, the western Gulf of Alaska. And not a bad day over the southeast coast, although the mid and high level cirrus streaming into the northern panhandle along the coast here during the afternoon hours. For tonight, that'll continue. Rain comes pretty close by late tonight into the panhandle there and sliding into Dixon Entrance as well as the North Gulf Coast. Actually, kind of right on the edge there, and some of that moisture breaking off and could produce some scattered shower activity, mostly over the Chugach Mountains up into the maybe the Talkeetna's western Alaskan range, but nothing significant expected. Definitely cloudier and a little milder. And better chance of some moisture, but interior areas, Kuskokwim Valley, west to the eastern Bering Sea, north central interior, all along the Yukon River, looking pretty good and dry. Brooks Range basically dry, chance of flurries, north slope, Arctic coast, anywhere there, all the way down to the Seward Peninsula again, the Bering Strait. Moisture not quite reaching St. Lawrence Island yet with that next system. It's staying out to the west there, and the front not all that strong as it drags over the western Aleutians. But there will be an increase in the wind and some rain out there, but higher pressure, light winds, some chlorine, Adak and Atka. Definitely lighter winds coming down considerably, becoming light and variable for the Pribilofs. And look for winds to diminish over the eastern Aleutians as well, but stay quite windy over the Alaska Peninsula. And Bristol Bay will be on the breezy side as well. And for the outlook for Monday, again, that front not making much headway eastward, as well as the rain right along the coast, just a chance of there. Otherwise dry, maybe lingering sunshine over toward the eastern border there. The Panhandle, North Gulf Coast, just a chance of rain as that rain shield kind of falls back to the south a little bit. Maybe Cape St. Elias will see the best chance of some moisture. Kodiak Island, lesser rainfall, lighter amounts with diminishing winds throughout the day. Bristol Bay could see some clearing. And high pressure up over the Brooks Range there makes it dry overall interior Alaska with a fair amount of clearing possible. Maybe not quite as much as what I'm showing there, but definitely be dry. Flurries continue mainly on the eastern Arctic coast. Chance of moisture reaches St. Lawrence Island and Nunivak Island during the late afternoon hours with increasing southerly winds and warmer temperatures. Rain likely for the Pribilofs with gusty winds, and that front extends down into the Adak and Atka area. And a trough swinging around the backside of that low just off the Russian coast will bring some rain back into the Shimiatu area. Outlook for Tuesday, low pressure shifts eastward just south of Gamble, 977 millibar low, and high pressure just off the map, or just on the map there in the lower corner, lower left-hand corner, 1030 millibar, so gradient between those two features. Quite windy conditions across the Bering Sea out of the west and northwest, right across the eastern Aleutians and western Alaska Peninsula, with numerous showers or just flat out periods of rain and fog there. Maybe some mixed rain and snow developing as colder air and lower snowfall levels come in from the west and northwest into the Pribilofs. That same pattern up across the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, southern Seward Peninsula, and St. Lawrence Island. And then that front still off the coast, really weakening now as it hangs off the coast. Higher pressure building over western Canada, keeping it at bay. So don't look for a lot of moisture, kind of in a dry pattern there, and it looks like it'll continue at least through Tuesday. And south central Alaska, just look for some clouds with a chance of mountain moisture maybe. It'll be on the light side. Northern Alaska stays dry all the way out to the Arctic coast with possible clearing even on the coastal areas. Lows for tonight, Panhandle, lower to mid-30s, and lower to mid-30s for southern Alaska, right along the coastline there. 32 for Valdez, 39 Soldotna, 45 though for Kodiak, upper 20s Bristol Bay, upper teens Nikolai and McGrath, 24 for Sleep Mutant Sparrowvon, 19 for Gulkana. Highs tomorrow, mid-30s Copper River Basin, lower 30s northern Kuskokwim Valley, mid-40s or 40 to 45 for Bristol Bay. Look for a high near 50 for Kodiak Island, lower 50 southern Panhandle, mid-40s to the north, otherwise lower to mid-40s south central Alaska, Prince William Sound. Lows the following morning, mid-30s, lower to mid-30s, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, upper 20s, Manuska, Susitna Valley, lower 20s, Copper River Basin, as well as the Kuskokwim Valley, upper 30s to mid-40s for the Panhandle, and that'll be followed by highs in the 30s, inland areas of southern Alaska, otherwise 40 to 45 elsewhere, especially out toward the coastline, even milder over the Panhandle, mid-50s there, Prince of Wales Island to Mount Edgecombe and Sitka, mid-40s for Juneau. Up to the north, lows 0 to 10, North Slope and Arctic coast in the teens, south of the Brooks Range, and highs tomorrow in the 20s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Graphic Monday morning, IFR, eastern North Slope, Arctic coast, otherwise marginal VFR from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic Ocean. So marginal VFR through the Bering Strait, a little bit into the Seward Peninsula, and just on the west side of St. Lawrence Island, down to St. Matthew Island and Adak, Atka, eastern Aleutians right into the Alaska Peninsula, including the Pribilofs into the southwest coast and the interior, all VFR. Band of IFR out there with a system western Aleutians, and IFR Kodiak Island up into southern Prince William Sound. And the Panhandle, VFR, except Prince of Wales Island and those areas, Metlakatla, Ketchikan, marginal, And for the afternoon, marginal VFR again, Prince of Wales Island along the central and south coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, good VFR continues. Most of interior Alaska, except for the Koyukuk Valley, looking at VFR flying conditions right down into Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, Fox Islands. Front moves eastward, bringing the IFR to Adak and Atka, just west of the Pribilos by late in the afternoon. Northward to near Nunivak Island and into St. Lawrence Island. Some marginal VFR into the Bering Strait. Then a break, and then IFR, Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and central and eastern North Slope, Eastern Brooks Range, marginal, and that extends down into the eastern Koyukuk Valley to about the Yukon River. And for the morning Tuesday, IFR, Arctic coast and North Slope, and mostly VFR south of the Brooks Range all the way down through Cook Inlet, but some marginal VFR turning an arm, maybe into the eastern Matanuska Valley, southern Copper River Basin with the IFR, Resurrection Bay up into Prince William Sound and eastern North Gulf Coast, and then marginal for Yakutat, Panhandle solid VFR, and for Atka to about Nikolsky VFR, Pribilos in the marginal zone, IFR east northern Bering Sea all along the southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula into Bristol Bay. And for Tuesday afternoon, that area shifts inland. So we've got quite a widespread area of IFR from Cook Inlet across the western Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Valley, right on out to the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, St. Matthew Island to the Bering Straits, southern and southwest Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula, western Norton Sound, and Nulato Hills IFR, and marginal, and then some VFR over the eastern interior, and North Slope Arctic coast, mostly IFR. And then conditions improve. A lot of marginal VFR over the Bering Sea, Pribilos, Fox Islands, but for Adak out to Shimmy and Attu, VFR. Passes, Anatuvik, VFR, but a little bit better for Adak. Going to go VFR the entire day for that pass. Either entrance, Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR, rainy, VFR, nice day for windy as well. VFR flying on both north and south entrances. Isabel, VFR. And Mentesta, good VFR. Tanita, starting out marginal VFR, becomes VFR probably by mid-morning or toward noon at the latest. And then Portage, looking marginal there, especially on the eastern entrance. Out west, though, VFR. And for Chilcoot White, good VFR. Sailing visibility is unlimited, hopefully. And 2,000 feet for the freezing levels right along the North Gulf Coast, cutting through the northern Panhandle, just south of the Pribilofs, and quite a gradient there over the southern Bering Sea and across the Aleutians, anywhere from 6 to 10,000 feet. Looking at icing system, bringing isolated moderate rime icing into the central Aleutians, maybe reaching the Pribilofs and possibly St. Lawrence Island. And another zone affecting mostly Kodiak Island, not quite reaching the North Gulf Coast, not quite reaching the Panhandle, staying mostly offshore through the day, icing free over all of interior Alaska, right on out to the Arctic coast. And the jet stream, westerlies 130 to 140 knots across central Aleutians, 105 knots there just north of the Alaska Peninsula, and then kind of splits there with one branch southwest, 65 knots into the Seward Peninsula, and then it dives southeastward, 95, picking up to 130 knots there south of Kodiak Island. Sharp trough, and then back southeast to south, 130 knots, drops off 65 to 80 knots across the southeast coast under some ridging that continues. So systems coming right up to the coastline, but not really making it inland. And at 9,000 feet, east-northeast, 35 to 40 knots, southern Kenai Peninsula, Barren Islands, Kodiak Island. Stronger westerlies out over the Aleutians and southern Bering Sea, 55 to 65 knots. Southwest, 50 knots to Nunivak Island, 35 knots, Seward Peninsula. 3,000 feet, strong winds stay off the southeast coast. And turbulence, moderate chop all along the southeast coast, Kodiak Island, St. Lawrence Island to the Pribilofs and the Aleutians.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Toman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at gale warnings tomorrow for the southeast coast. On the south coast, southeast winds 40 to 45 knots. And for the north coast, east-southeast winds 40 to 45 knots with seas just under 30 feet. And inside waters much lighter, especially Lynn Canal northwest at 15. Stevens Passage, a little squirrely, variable to northeast at 20, gust 35 knots. And Clarence Strait, southeast winds 25 knots, seas 9 feet. Moving on to the outlook for Tuesday, we've got still gale warnings on the south coast for southeasterlies at 45 knots. That gradient staying tight as a front, not moving inland, but staying off the coast there. And hence we got gales right through Tuesday. North coast, east-southeast, 40 to 45 knots. Again, seas just under 30 feet, about 25 feet. In the south coast, east 20 knots, a little lighter there for Clarence Strait on Tuesday. And northeast 25 for Stevens Passage. Lynn Canal, still northwest at 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Prince William Sound, northeast winds at 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Gale warnings, Southern Cook Inlet and Kamishak Bay, north winds at 35 knots. And gale warnings for the North Gulf Coast, east-northeast, 45 knots, seas 20 to 25 feet. Barren Islands, northeast at 40 with 22-foot seas. For Tuesday, Northern Cook Inlet, northeast breeze at 20 knots, and small craft advisories for Southern Cook Inlet, north at 25. Small crafts also for Kamishak Bay, north winds at 30 knots. Gale warnings for the North Gulf Coast, east 35 to 40 knots, and east 35 knots for the Barren Islands, seas about 19 feet. And for the Kodiak Island area along the east side there, northeast 45 knots, seas 22 feet. Shelikof Strait, north at 40. North winds 40 knots there from Sitkinak to Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, north at 35 knots. Small craft advisory from Cape Sarachev, Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and Bristol Bay, northerlies 25 knots, seas 7 feet. And from Bristol Bay on Tuesday, winds west at 20 knots, seas still around 8 feet. And then small craft advisories, Alaska Peninsula, west winds 30 knots. And northwest 30 for the east side of Kodiak Island, north at 20 for Shelikof Strait. And for the Fox Islands, west-southwest, 20 to 30 knots tomorrow. Adak and Atka, south, 25 to 30 knots. And 30 knots from Chitka Island. Western Aleutians, gale warning, southwest at 40 knots, seas 23 feet. Gale warnings for the western Aleutians for west-southwest winds at 35 knots. Adak and Atka, west 35 knots. Gale warnings for the Fox Islands, Unmak Island, southwest at 35. Unalaska Island, west at 35 knots, seas 13 to 19 feet. Southwest coast, south to southwest winds, 25 knots, good for small craft advisories. Small craft advisories also for St. Lawrence Island, southeast winds now at 30 knots. Gale warnings for south winds 35 knots for St. Matthew Island, and southerlies at 30 knots for the Pribilofs, with seas at 9 feet. Norton Sound east at 15. Outlook for Tuesday, Norton Sound, small craft advisories, increasing winds, southeast winds increasing to 30 knots. Southeast 30 knots also for St. Lawrence Island. Southwest coast, southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Gale warnings for the Pribilofs, west winds 30 knots, southwest 35 knots for St. Matthew Island, and seas at around 20 feet for both St. Paul, St. George, and St. Matthew Island. Beaufort Sea Coast, east side, light winds out of the west at 10 knots. Central and west side, west-southwest at 15. East 15 from Cape Beaufort to Wales. And the outlook for Tuesday, increase those wind small craft advisories from Wales up to Cape Beaufort, east 25 to 30 knots. Gale warnings for the western Arctic coast, east 35 knots. Small craft advisories for the central coast, east winds 25 knots, seas 6 feet. And 30 knot east winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with 6-foot seas. And for tonight, areas of light snow continue at times for the entire stretch of the Arctic coast. There could see maybe another inch in some locations, but basically, generally, it'll be less than that. Otherwise, the interior dry all along the Yukon River, Kuskokwim River Valley looking good as well. Some rain or snow showers depending on your elevation and time of evening here for the areas south of the Alaska Range. Chance of rain along the North Gulf Coast and just grazing the Panhandle. But strong winds and rain tonight for Kodiak Island. That continues. Next front spreading some rain into the western Aleutians. Pushing eastward tomorrow, maybe to Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, definitely the Pribilofs, Adak and Atka. Chance of rain diminishes and wind diminishes for Kodiak Island, and rain basically staying off the coastline elsewhere with not a bad day for interior Alaska. Still some flurries on the Arctic coast, and the outlook for Tuesday, quite a low pressure area over the northern Bering Sea, so gusty west winds with numerous rain and rain showers across all the Bering Sea into the Alaska Peninsula.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.